Welcome. My name is Jane Shepard, and I'm the head of alumni programming here at Udacity. Today, we'd like to welcome our very special guest, Dr. Nico Rose, who's here to help you understand how to ace your job interview with positive psychology. Nico was a featured speaker this year at Intersect. We were so impressed with his actionable advice and his keen insights that we asked him to come back today to share some specific tips with our alumni community and our students about how to ace your job interview. Dr. Rose is the Vice President for Employer Branding and Talent Acquisition for Bertelsmann, Europe's leading media corporation. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Rose, and perhaps Nico, you can start by telling us a bit about Bertelsmann and some of the companies you represent.
We also bring you lots of music. We're behind people like Bruno Mars. We're behind Kylie Minogue. We've just signed the Rolling Stones. And we are also publishing Iron Maiden, which kind of makes me feel I'm their colleague. It's very cool. And I've been in human resources for roughly 50 years now. So I've conducted, I have stopped counting, but I would say roughly 15,000 interviews in my time. And I'm willing to share everything that I've learned through doing these interviews. And then the picture on the bottom right is, well, you can see probably Benjamin Franklin. And I had the great honor of studying positive psychology with the founder of this discipline, a guy named Martin Seligman. I'm going to share in a minute what positive psychology is all about. And I'm trying to kind of bring these two perspectives together for tonight. So my experience as HR professional and recruiter, and at the same time kind of trying to sneak in little bits and pieces of what I think in positive psychology will help us to lead better interviews, but also to find out what kind of jobs we should be seeking out in the first place. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So if you've never heard of positive psychology before, it's also applied psychology, and it's been around roughly for the last 20 years. And again, the name that's basically kind of stuck to that discipline is Martin Seligman. He's one of the most renowned psychologists in the world. That's why I put my selfie with him on this page to brag. And in very short, psychology has sort of been a discipline that was very much concerned with getting rid of things for the first 100 years. So let's say, what is a depression? How does this come about? How can we understand it? And how can we understand to get rid of depression? So how can we get rid of the more negative things in life? And this is what psychology as a discipline has been concerned with for the first 100 years. And then there was a group of some very influential psychologists, and one of them was Martin Seligman, who said, okay, we probably need to also understand with the same scientific rigor what makes people happy in life. How do we get more meaning into our lives? How do we get more meaning into our jobs? And these are very overarching questions that positive psychology is concerned with. And here you see this kind of overarching framework. So if you ask Marty, what is positive psychology all about? He'd probably say it's PERMA. And PERMA is an acronym, and you see the question is, how do we get more positive emotions in our life? How do we create conditions, for example, at work that makes people want to engage themselves in what they do? Might think about the experience of flow that's very much attached to a guy named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who's also a positive psychologist. You might have read one of these books. It's about what makes relationships work on and off work, obviously, but it's definitely also about how we can get teams to work in a way that the sum is greater than the part. And then obviously, how do we get more meaning into our lives? Also, how do we get more meaning into our work life? That's a very pressing question, I would say right now. And part of what I have to share with you today is also concerned with that question. And lastly, it's also about achievement. So how do we become more successful in whatever domain in life we want to be successful? And vitality was kind of put in there a little bit afterwards, because obviously our body also plays a big part in our well-being. And if we feel well on the physical level, it also affects our psychological well-being. And that's why they've put in the vitality part a little bit later. So this is just a very, very quick overview of positive psychology. There's a lot of cool stuff online. And if you are interested in learning more about that subject in general, when I was admitted to studying psychology, positive psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, I started a blog, and I'm still doing that. It's called mapolicious.com. So if you kind of want to know how it is to study positive psychology at Penn, you can just follow me from the very beginning. Now, the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I would love to stick with that. So the first kind of tool that I want to teach to you today, this is basically a development that was taken on in positive psychology, is creating what we call a positive portfolio. And this is especially helpful for all of you who might be a little anxious in life in general, but who might also be anxious before an interview. This is a very neat way to get into the right mood for an interview, and also for those of you that might be a little anxious, it might be a very good way to kind of calm yourselves down a little bit. And basically, this is a very smart way to use your smartphones. And what you want to do is create a folder on your smartphone, just as you might have had a classic photo album in print early in your life. And what you want to put in that folder on your smartphone is a selection of either photos, and I've shared some of the photos in my positive portfolio with you right now on the screen. You can also put in there pieces of music that you really like. You can put in there little videos. And what you should do is you should select media, to speak more generally, that are really uplifting in their content. So these should be on the very positive side in terms of life, things in life that you still remember. So just to give you an example, obviously you can see in here is a wedding picture. Actually, I had my wedding day yesterday, so it was 7 years ago. The picture on top where I'm getting this hat is the day when my PhD was finally done, and I hated doing it, so it was a very big relief when that was finished. The one on the bottom left is actually a little bit bittersweet. It's saying goodbye to my 2 little children, and I do a lot of business travel, but it still has a lot of meaning to me. And then the last one actually is from last year at a very large heavy metal festival in the north of Germany, and I have very positive emotions when I look at that picture. And then there's another one of having a Christmas party at Marty Seligman's house. And if you're not a psychologist, having a Christmas party at Marty Seligman's house is like having a Christmas party with, I don't know, Ryan Gosling for everybody else, or whoever you want to put in there. So the point is, pick photos, pick videos, pick music that kind of automatically lift your mood or calm you down. They should be so far in the positive end that you don't even have to think about it. It should be an automatic process. So I don't have to think, oh, this was my wedding day. Probably it was a very good day. It just happens. It was one of the best days of my life. And when I look at this wedding picture, I automatically get a smile on my face. My heartbeat goes down a little bit, and I'm just getting in a very, very positive mood. So the truth is, each and every one of you that's watching right now, you all have these pictures. You just need to gather them in one place, put some music in there, put some video material in there. I have lots of little videos from my little kids that my wife sends me on WhatsApp. And if you then have a look at this portfolio just 2 or 3 minutes before you are being asked to go in that interview, it will automatically calm you down a little bit. Or you can even experiment with having different portfolios. You might create a portfolio that's more like a little bit uplifting, but you might also create a portfolio that's a little bit more relaxing and calming you down. Maybe photos from your last holidays, something from the beach or whatever, and just experiment with finding the right mixture for you. And yeah, this is a very neat way of kind of relaxing and getting into the mood without having to do a lot of things. I know these days lots of people are into yoga or doing relaxation exercises, and I'm heavily into it. It's just not very practical right before the interview. So you need something that works very fast, and you need something that you can do while you're already sitting in that interview room. And everybody is having their smartphones these days, so this is just something very neat I wanted to share with you. First step before the interview even starts. Can you switch to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. This is also something that was developed right in the domain of positive psychology, actually at the University of Michigan. A neat exercise to find out what your true strengths are and how do you need that and how do you need to know that. First, finding out what your strengths are will help you well, to have more fun in your life, to have more meaning in your life, because it's very well known and there's a lot of research behind it that when you are working on tasks that are close to your strength, you'll have better results, you'll have more fun while you're doing it, and you'll experience more meaning while you're doing it. So finding out what your strengths are is helpful in a lot of different ways. But obviously it can also help you to have a better interview, because at some point people will ask you, well, tell me about your strengths, tell me about your weaknesses. And my feeling is when I'm interviewing with somebody, I would love to hear your real strength. I would not like to hear something that you kind of learn from the heart by a book. You know, everybody says, yo, I'm really impatient or something like that. No recruiter wants to hear this kind of answer. So finding out what your real strengths are is really critical for having a good interview, but also for long-term career success. And there's a couple of different ways to do this. You can take a test online. So there's the classic Gallup strength test. There's also a separate strength test that was developed in positive psychology. If you go to the website viacharacter.org, you'll find a strength test that's actually free of charge, and I highly encourage you to do that. And the third way, which actually involves other people, is shown right here, and this is something that we call finding your reflected best self. And your reflected best self actually is something that other people give you. And the process is very neat and very simple. You ask a group of people, you need at least 10 to 15, at best 20 people, and you ask them to tell stories about you. And the question is, can you tell me a story or even 2 or 3 stories where you saw me at my best? And you can ask those people via email, or you can ask them to share these stories personally with you. And you then take those stories, and actually it works best if you have them in writing, and you kind of go through the different stories to find out commonalities. So are there things that a lot of people see in you when you are at your best? And then so you can read through these stories and underline them and kind of try to integrate all the different bits and pieces on your person when you are at your best. And this sounds a little bit abstract right now. On the left, you see what came out of it. So the end of the process is creating this reflected best self-portrait that you can carry around with you. Actually, this one also hangs in my it's in my office wall. But if you want to know how this kind of works out, I have created a LinkedIn Pulse article. So, and you see this on the right. So if you go to my site on LinkedIn and to that Pulse section, you'll find this article on optimal human functioning. And this is a very neat description of how you can kind of collect the stories and how you should go about integrating them into your best self-portrait. And I just wanted to share this with you very quickly today. And then please go to the next slide. Thank you very much. Yeah. And this one is also something that comes right out of positive psychology. Actually, Amy Resnesky is now teaching at Yale, and she's one of the first and foremost researchers worldwide on the topic of how we get more meaning into our work life. And together with a couple of colleagues, she's written this beautiful research paper a couple of years ago that kind of integrates 30 years of research on what are the drivers of meaning in life. And at the end of that paper, she came up with this diagram that I'm sharing with you here right now. And basically, she says there are kind of 4 separate drivers that bring meaning into one's work life. If you look to the top right, this is kind of what in a lot of contexts is called purpose, the purpose of the organization. So how is that organization helping to make the world a better place? And if there's a clear answer to that while working for that organization, this is a separate driver of meaning for the individual. If you go to the bottom right, unification, this is the question, do I feel connected to the people that I'm working with in the organization? But also, do I feel connected to the larger system? Do I feel connected to the values of the organization? Do I feel connected to these kinds of overarching layers of meaning? And if that is true, this is a separate driver of meaning. And while I'm explaining this to you, you might kind of have a little kind of lever right now, which let's say there's a scale from 1 to 10, and 10 means I'm having this in my job full tilt boogie right now, and 1 is, well, I could have a lot of more of that in my work right now. Maybe you just do this math in your head, where am I right now, and how could I get more of that in my work life? So switching over to the bottom left, this is pretty much directly connected to what I've told you before about finding out what your real strengths are. So self-connection is the question of, do I feel I'm coming closer to myself, to my personality while at work? And actually finding out what your real strengths are and switching your tasks at work, or sometimes switching your job, so you can spend more time on tasks that reflect your true strength, is also a way of getting more in connection with your inner self. And this again is a separate driver of meaning in your work life. And the last one is on the top left. This is actually about individuation. It's about control and autonomy. So the more you have the experience of kind of freedom to do what you want, the more leeway you have, the more decision-making power you have in your job. This is also a separate driver of meaning. So this is a little bit easier when you rise up the top. So typically when you rise to the top, you have more discretionary decision-making power. But obviously, if you still have lots of bosses, it's also about the way that you are led by your superiors. If they give you a lot of autonomy, if they kind of delegate a lot of decision-making power, you'll experience more meaning in your job than if everybody basically tells you what to do. It's kind of obvious. So those are the 4 overarching drivers. And what I did for my presentation at Intersect, and I'm going to share this with you, is how to use the last part of the interview, where it's typically about you asking questions to the interviewer, how you can kind of use these 4 different questions to ask specific questions to find out if, with all likelihood, this job will provide meaning to you. So can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. So first question, if you want to find out about individuation, you could ask, actually the slide has fallen apart a little bit, but never mind. What do I do around here when I have a good idea? How can I contribute to decision making? How are people involved in decision making, even at the lower ranks of the company? And if the interviewer goes like, I don't know, then you might probably want to turn around and go away, especially if you are interested in having a large impact on an organization. Also, how are career tracks designed at your company? And if they have something ready, if they have something to say on that topic, it's probably a well-run company in terms of talent management. If they again go like, well, it's basically up to you to find out, then you might probably turn around. It's okay if they are not ready yet. If you, for example, apply to a startup, but at a large organization like ours, they should have very clear answers on career progression, training and development. And if they don't have that in place, or the recruiter doesn't know, probably, well, go somewhere else. So that's very short about individuation. And also, if you don't get a chance to ask questions, obviously you can still use these questions afterwards in reflection to use your gut feeling to find out if this job probably will bring meaning to you according to these different factors. So next slide, please. About contribution, that's actually very easy. How are you delivering value to your customers or to your stakeholders? How are you delivering value to your community? Again, look for what the recruiter or the hiring manager has to say. If they have good answers, good job. If they don't have any answers, might be a little bit cautious on that end. How is your company helping to make the world a better place? That's actually a pretty beautiful and very important question. Or what is the purpose of your organization? Again, listen to what the recruiters have to say. If they don't have good answers, maybe not for now. Next slide, please. Unification. What are the values of your organization? And that's actually a cheesy one. A lot of companies have values and they have these little cards or they have it on their websites. And a lot of times it's true they don't mean a lot. So if they have values, I would basically go directly to the second questions. And the one is, how are these values actually lived at your company? Can you give me concrete examples of how these values are lived? Because everybody can write down words on home pages and print down words on these little cards that you can put in your wallet. But how these values are actually enacted while you are working there, how is this reflected in their leadership behaviors, for example? That's a totally different animal. And again, if they have good answers for you, if they have answers from their own working life, it's probably a good sign. If they go like that, I have to ask my manager or whatever, please turn around, because then it's probably not a value-driven organization. And obviously, do people around here spend time together when they are not working? This is, again, this is about group cohesion, this is about company culture, this is about the question if you will have fun with the people you're working together, also a very important aspect. And last but not least, can you please go to the last, at least the last slide in that series, self-connection. How can I make a contribution on top of my job description? So what most people find out after some time in the job is that they like their jobs, but they want to do more. They want to go beyond their job description. And depending on the company culture, also depending on the leadership culture, this is more or less possible. And typically it's a good sign if people can engage in what positive psychologists call job crafting. So can I turn the job description or the job that I have into the one that I really want to have, without having to leave the company, without having to leave the current kind of leadership structure. So if you have a very good boss that gives you a lot of leeway, a lot of decision-making power, this person will help you to shape the job that you have right now so it becomes more of the job you really want to have. That's called job crafting. And if that is possible, and if they can give you examples of this kind of behavior, it's a very good sign. How can I readjust my tasks and responsibilities over time? This is also important for career progression. And then what are your policies pertaining to inclusion and diversity? This is a very important question, I think, for everybody. But obviously, you want to feel that you can bring your whole self to the job. At least that's my ideal. I don't want to be a different person when I'm at home compared to when I'm at work or anywhere else. So how much of my true self can I bring and then show while I'm at work? And again, I would very closely listen to what recruiters and hiring managers have to say on that final question. So obviously, these are not all the questions that you can ask at the end of the interview. You might also ask about money and everything else. But really to find out if this is a worthwhile job opportunity, if it's going to likely bring meaning to your life, I would pick some of these questions and ask them at the end of the job interview. Again, last slide, please. I think this is really the last one. Yes, so these are just my contact dates. And I've uploaded these slides to this tiny URL you can see up there. So if you go to tinyurl.com/UDA-IMA, you should probably get to a link where you can download these slides. And this is all I've prepared for today in terms of telling you a little bit about positive psychology. And I'm now very happy to hear all of your questions. And I'm already at home. It's already late in Germany, so we can go on forever.
Thank you, Nico. That was fascinating. I love the way you applied the tenets of psychology and then gave actual questions to ask. That's always a tough thing at the end of an interview when they say, what questions do you have? And I like that you gave questions that help people to decide not just if they're right for the job, but if the job is right for them, which is a critical piece that a lot of people overlook. So that's wonderful. Thank you. I wanted to jump in with a question from one of our attendees who also saw you at Intersect. And his comment was that you mentioned at Intersect that everyone's winging it. So a lot of this is about preparing for the interview and coming in and being very prepared. What do you have to say about that as far as like getting yourself mentally prepared and the need to wing it in an interview at some point?
Well, I think this everybody is totally winging it all the time is kind of what applies to life in general. So yes, there are situations where we are prepared and there are situations where we are unprepared. But in general, this is getting a bit philosophical, but life is complicated and there's always much more information that we don't have and things that we don't know compared to what we actually know. And there's always things that you can prepare for. And then in a job interview, but also in life in general, there's going to be 99% where you're probably not properly prepared. And just keeping that in mind, that is true for every applicant that you kind of comparing yourself with, but it's also probably true for the recruiter and for the hiring manager, is kind of a thought that gives a little comfort to me. So don't get too tight. And I think what I've also talked about at Intersect is a concept that we call self-compassion. Everybody talks about self-esteem, or this was the rave in the 80s and 90s, and how can I get more self-esteem, which is like, you know, I'm the man or whatever. And the funny thing about self-esteem is there's tons of research out there, and it doesn't really help you all that much. Actually, if you have too much self-esteem, it turns you into an a-hole, so whatever. Self-compassion is something that's rather new. It was kind of rediscovered or put into research by a researcher named Christine Neff, N-E-F-F. And this is really more about kind of finding out not what separates you from other people, like I have high self-esteem and you all have low self-esteem. This is about how do we treat ourselves when things go wrong? Like, how do we treat ourselves when we messed up a question right in the interview? Do we kind of internally start to criticize ourselves and beating ourselves up? Or do we say, well, this is very common and I've been asked 20 questions and I've given 18 perfect answers and I messed this one up, and this is kind of a human thing. It's about understanding how that actually connects us to other people. A lot of people think that making errors is kind of something that separates us from other people and they're going to judge us. But being humans and making errors and winging it is something that connects us to other people. And keeping that in mind is also part of what we call self-compassion. And the last thing that they teach is to not over-identify with your flaws and your errors, but kind of learning how to treat yourself with kindness. The truth is that the things that we say to ourselves, sometimes in public, but also in our heads, are probably much meaner than most of the things that we would allow other people to say to us. So learning how to treat ourselves with kindness, how to respond to our flaws and errors in the same way that we would respond to the flaws of a very good friend, is also part of self-compassion. And then again, keeping in mind, everybody is totally kind of blindfolded for this is my metaphor. We're all blindfolded. So because there's always much more things that we actually don't know, and keeping that in mind really helps me to relax in any kind of situation. And that's a bit of a learning journey. This is not something that you kind of switch on. It's not like a 1-0 thing, but increasingly learning how to be a friend to yourself is actually a very worthwhile learning journey.
Wonderful. That kind of self-compassion feels like it would be very helpful when you realize in the middle of the interview that you've answered a question poorly. Do you have any specific tips for people to regroup? I know before you talked about the positivity album. Is there a mental reframe that people can use when you make that dreaded realization that you screwed up and you don't want it to color the rest of your interview? You should just own it, or how would you handle it in the face of the interview?
So what I've experienced being an interviewer sometimes is that people actually said, you know what, I think this last answer that I've given to you was not my best answer, and can I give you another answer to that? And unless we've already run out of time, and which probably never happens, because I would really love to hear the best answer of that person. Obviously, you can just give another answer. And here's one thing that I've already ranted about a lot, more in German. I write a lot of stuff, but mostly in German. If you go to all these websites and applications, and there's books out there, there's literature, I always feel like a lot of these consultants paint this picture where applications are warfare, where we kind of have to brace ourselves and put on an armor, and everybody is kind of learning new techniques to outsmart the other person. And so it's like this tug of war, and I put an armor on and you put. I find this highly stupid. If I want to decide if I want to be one of your colleagues in the future, if you should work for my company, I want to find out about the real you. I want to find out how you work when you are relaxed. Because when you're not working in a company full of a-holes, you're probably relaxed most of the time. So all these things about stress interviewing and these killer questions and how to, I've never asked a killer question in my whole life. I don't even know what that is. I think they are useless. So if you've messed up a question and you feel that this was not your best answer, say, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Recruiter, I think this was not my best answer, and now I'm giving you my best answer. And I don't know anybody who would say, oh, I don't want to hear that. They do want to hear that. They actually, for a recruiter, the best thing to do and to experience is meeting awesome people. Recruiters want you to succeed. They don't want you to fail. They want you to succeed. If you have the feeling that you are in an interview where the recruiter wants you to fail, go out of the door. I've done that before. I'm not going to say the name of the company right now, but there was one time when 5 minutes after a telephone interview, I kind of wrote the person an email. I said, you know, I'm a big fan of your company. I'm going to be a customer. But if the way you treated me during that interview is anywhere close to what you're treating your employees in daily life, I don't want to work for you. So recruiters want you to succeed. Recruiters want to find awesome persons. They want to help you. And if you have not given your best answer, give it again. Period.
That's awesome. So what I hear in that answer is, I think, two things. One is humanity and one is honesty. Just being honest about being, and we're all human. So assuming that there's a level of empathy, and if that's missing, it's probably a good tell about what the job is all about as well. So right. Thank you. That's helpful. Speaking of the nature of humanity, though, and differences in how personalities are, what advice would you have for someone who might be shy? Like, a lot of what you're talking about is playing off of the social interaction and relating to someone at a human level throughout the interview. Are there any tips from positive psychology people who might not be as socially confident or shy might use to help them in the interview?
Yes. So actually, I think at Intersect we had the question on power posing, like, should you do the Amy Cuddy? And I think the scientific case on that is pretty much open. So Amy Cuddy has gotten a lot of kind of pushback recently, but she also very recently published another paper where she kind of gives evidence that bolsters her thesis. My answer is, if you like power posing, do it. It doesn't matter if it's scientifically validated. Just, you know, find a place where you can do that without being laughed at. If you like to listen to heavy metal music because it calms you down or cheers you up, in my case, please go and listen to heavy metal. First thing, again, I'd like to come back to my presentation. If you suffer from shyness, if you suffer from anxiety, you can create a positive portfolio that is actually designed to counter that tendency. So you might kind of create a portfolio where you only put in pictures where you've been in a very relaxed situation, like pictures from your holiday, whatever. You know these situations where you are in a very relaxed mood, and if there's photos from that, or if there's music that is associated with being very calm, with being very relaxed, by all means put that in there and it will help you. Then the next thing is, if you suffer from shyness, and a lot of people do, I would put in a lot of extra practice, especially in your opening. Put in a lot of practice in giving the handshake, put in practice in kind of having good, firm eye contact, and put a lot of practice in kind of giving your opening statements. Typically at the beginning of the interview, they will ask you to tell a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your CV, tell me about what you do in your free time. And it's the same thing with giving a keynote. What you typically want to have is you want to make sure that the first minute or the first 2 minutes are kind of learned by heart in a very good fashion. Because once you've come through the initial stage, typically people forget that they are, I mean, they don't forget that they are in an interview, but the kind of critical question is to get over that first hump and to get into the flow of the interview. And by having something prepared, how do I want to do that handshake? How do I want to address my partner? What are the first 2 or 3 questions or what are the first 2 or 3 things I want to share about myself? If you have a very good preparation on that, it will probably give you a good start, and then you will have that flow experience where you don't even have to think about it anymore. And also something I think I said at Intersect, the other thing, the question is, you don't prepare to kind of give a speech there. People want to have an interaction. They don't want to hear something that you've learned by heart. It's okay for an opening statement. It's okay for the end of the interview, but typically people want to have a real conversation. So I think one of my spontaneous punchline at Intersect was, you're preparing so you get better at winging it. You don't prepare to pull off what you prepared. You prepare so you feel more confident while you're winging it. But again, having those 2 or 3 first minutes kind of safe in the back of your head will probably counter your shyness and give you a good start.
Good answer. So somewhere between that continuum of winging it and preparing it and coming into it with the structure, what about during the interview? Some people's nervousness manifests itself as the inability to focus. So they're so thinking about the outcome and the next question that they're unable to really zero in on what's being asked them at that time or solving the technical problem at hand. Do you have any tips for helping people try to harness that racing mind that's thinking of the outcome instead of focusing and being in the moment?
Right, so this is obviously a tough one, because when you're in that situation and you're kind of noticing that you've lost focus, it might lead to kind of losing your focus even more. Again, I'm a big believer in kind of naming things. There's this punchline of name it to tame it, right? So when you've lost in Germany, we say your red thread. Everybody's looking for the red thread in Germany. I don't know why. If you've lost your thread, if you don't feel your focus right now, I think it's totally okay to say that. You know, dear recruiter, I have lost my focus right now. Can I have 10 or 15 seconds to settle? And again, if this recruiter wants you to succeed, he's going to give you that time. And the good thing is, while you're doing it, you're actually showing that you're self-aware, because being aware of not being aware is a part of self-awareness. So it actually conveys that you have skills in that area. And at the same time, it'll buy you some time to refocus. And sometimes it helps to kind of restate the last 1 or 2 sentences so you get back in the flow. If you restate your last 1 or 2 sentences, typically it comes to your mind what you wanted to say next, and this can be a segue to getting back into the interview. And again, just name it to tame it. You know what? I think I've lost my thread. And then this is something that you might want to prepare up front. This is also a very good exercise in general. Typically taking some deep breath to your belly. This is something that you can do every evening for me. Will kind of give you more oxygen. It will typically slow your heart rate down. Slowing your heart rate down will tell your brain, oh, you're relaxing. So what you do is when we're upset, we start to breathe more at the top, like, and this will give feedback to your brain, like, I'm excited. This is something that should excite me. I'm not relaxed. Learning to breathe like through this, if you put your hand like this and really go like, if you train that a little bit and you can manage to do that during the interview, really take these deep breaths into your belly. It gives you oxygen and it will actually tell your brain, but your whole body, I'm calming down right now. And this will also help you to regain your composure. It's just it's a physical thing.
And sometimes the physical can help drive the mental, right? You can't talk yourself into it.
Right.
So a lot of the things you're talking about have to do with interhuman relations. So you're reading nonverbal cues and you're like playing off of the emotions and empathy of the person. What about a phone interview where you don't have the benefit of being in the room and making eye contact with the person? How can you use these principles to still connect and make a good impression at that level and put your best foot forward?
Sorry, are you talking about a phone interview
Yes.
or a video interview?
A telephone interview where, or a video, but something where you're not actually in the room with the person. So it's maybe a pre-screening interview where you don't have the benefit of like making the eye contact and getting the nonverbal feedback.
Right. So first thing is, so actually my company, apart from being a media company, we also run very, very large call centers. And in my former life, I've also consult with other companies that run call centers. What you see there, a lot of people running around, because when you run around while being on the phone, it's like a more full body experience, and it will free up your lungs. If you sit a lot, what we typically do, I'm doing this right now, is like you crouch together. This will kind of give you less oxygen. It would also kind of drive your it's kind of a metaphor, but it will drive your voice up from your gut area to just being here, and that might even give you a tone of voice that sounds not relaxed. So running around just kind of helps you to control your energy. It kind of helps you to broaden up your composure. And also what you can try, and this is actually an exercise that you have to probably carry out for a couple of weeks, but it will be very worthwhile, not only for interviewing, but in life in general. If you're giving presentations, if you're flirting with somebody at the bar, whatever. I have no idea what this is called in English, but in German, the technical term is you're finding your Eigen Tone. Eigen means own, tone is tone. And the theory is that everybody has a sort of frequency and when they talk that is very relaxing and very resonant. So if you manage to mostly talk in that frequency, it's kind of a good feeling for yourself, because it's very resonant, and it's also a good feeling for the other person because you get a very rich and full voice. What most people typically do, because they don't breathe deep enough, is we're communicating a little too high. The pitch is too high. So again, please Google Eigen Tone and then have an English translation. But what you can do before an interview or before giving a presentation is doing a counting exercise. And what you want to do is, I have no idea if this comes through the voice, but you want to hum really loud, like you go, and then you say, in German, 1. So, 1, 2, 3. And typically what you will try is to do this very loud, and you will have the tendency to go higher as you go louder. And this is a sign to go back a little bit. And what you can do is put your hand on your belly, and there's going to be a point, like a frequency, where you will get a lot of resonance in your belly. Like you can really feel it in your hands. And typically it's when you go a little bit deeper and practice speaking in that kind of deep tone of voice. It will give you a lot of authority. Speaking in a deep tone of voice is typically associated with being powerful, with being knowledgeable. And so you can kind of practice finding this tone for a minute or two every day for a couple of weeks. And then this is kind of the basis for you to start. So you start a conversation at your Eigen Tone, and then you can depart from that when you want to make a stress, then you can go back. And when you make a point, you go back down. And I can really feel it in my body right now when I hit that tone. And then you can depart again and can go be a little quicker, whatever. This is also a very good way to start a conversation. A lot of speakers do this last thing before they go on stage. They kind of count to find this special frequency, the special resonance in their voice. And this is the last thing they do before they go on stage. And you can do that before an interview as well. I'll find out what the term is in English. I don't know right now, but basically you just have to hum and go a little bit deeper. Sorry.
Apparently, someone has put in the chat box here that it is an official English word, Eigen Tone. So I think we all have learned a new word today.
Go and find your Eigen Tone.
Go find your Eigen Tone. I think it's a great idea. It sounds like finding your Eigen Tone is as valuable for you and your confidence as it is to the projection that you make to others. Along that line, I would like to flip the conversation for a moment. We've been talking a lot about how to prepare for your interview. What if you are the interviewer? What if you're on the other side of the desk? What kinds of positive psychology tips can you use to become a better interviewer?
Right. So obviously, I'm heavily influenced in that direction, but what I want to see and the kinds of questions that I ask to people, you know, obviously I give them a little bit of space in the beginning. So, you know, tell me about yourself, tell me a little bit about your CV, because I know that people have prepared that part. This is not so much because I'm super overly interested in the CV because I read the CV before. This is really about making that person feel comfortable, about getting into the flow. So I give them those 5 to 7 minutes. And what I typically do then is I ask a lot of questions along the lines of what kind of tasks, if I were your boss, or if I would put you into this company and you would start working here, what kind of tasks bring this smile to your eyes? What kind of tasks give you a lot of energy? Or I ask them, like, if you go to the past, so please tell me about a typical week from your last job, and what kind of tasks gave this smile to your face? What kind of tasks were you telling your partner about in the evening because you were excited about that? What kind of accomplishments have you kind of shared with your friends and family? Because what people will probably do is share those things that are important to them. So it tells you something about their values. They will probably share with you things that they were good at, and it tells you something about their strength. And they will also share with you things that they just kind of liked, which is also tied to their strength. But also you can kind of use these questions to tick off boxes. Like, in order to do that in a good manner, you obviously need to know a lot of things about the job that you're recruiting for. If you don't know about the tasks and specifics of these jobs, these are still nice questions. But I also use this to kind of give that person a realistic job preview. Like, if this is the job description it is right now, and you've told me now you like XYZ and you're really good at ABC, and I can promise you on 3 or 4 days of the week you're probably going to get a lot of XYZ when you go through that job. And then there's some other things that you don't probably like as much. But I want to find out when are people in what I would say, when do they get, where do they get their energy from? And what kind of tasks and also what kind of social structures give them energy versus draining them of their energy. This is the most important thing that I want to find out, because then I'm pretty confident if the job description or the wider system matches these kinds of drivers of the individual energy of that person, it's going to be a good fit. Most people are really smart and hardworking, so they can kind of learn most of the skills on the job. And I do a lot of MBA recruiting. These people are so smart and so well trained. So mostly it's not about can they do the job, but will they like the job? Will it bring meaning to them? Will it bring energy to them versus draining them of their energy? And I use most of my time as a recruiter to find out about these questions. And then obviously, if the person goes on to interview with a specific team, they will still ask about more technical questions. If I don't know too many things about coding, to be honest, so I'm not going to ask any technical questions. This is that these are the questions that the future bosses can ask. For me, it's really about fit to the company, fit to the culture. Do I feel that the job will bring meaning to the person? Do I feel that the job will bring energy to that person? And those are questions I'd like to ask. Very simple question. What are you like? What do people, I mean, coming back to this exercise, what do people say about you when you are at your best? People who've seen you at your best, what would people say about you brings out the best in you? Beautiful question. I can recommend that to any recruiter in the world.
That is a great question. So we have time for probably one last question, and it's an interesting one that someone has asked, and they basically were wondering what 3 books you might recommend to people. So if you don't do 3, you don't have to do 3, but is there a specific book or 2 that you could recommend to someone who might be interested in learning more about positive psychology and the ideas you've talked about here today?
Well, the book that kind of brought me to studying positive psychology, and I still read it once in a while because it has lots of beautiful exercise. It's called The How of Happiness. So this is one that's really kind of catered to the individual and how to get more happiness in your own life, how to get more meaning in your own life. The author is a professor from California, Riverside, Sonia Lyon-Wybierski, but The How of Happiness. It's already 10 years old, but I still recommend it in terms of, you know, learning more about what are the drivers of your own personal happiness. Then with respect to working life, there's so many good things out there. I'm a big fan, like probably 99% of the rest of the world, of Adam Grant. So things like Give and Take will give you a very good read, but will probably also give you an edge in your working life, because I believe that nice people finish first, and Adam has the science to kind of support this claim, and he's a brilliant author and overall a very nice person. Even though he's super important and writes for the New York Times, he once agreed to give an interview for my little blog thingy, so I'm forever in love with Adam. And whatever. Number 3. I mean, there's a lot of good books out there on meaning and how to get more meaning in your life. And there was one that was actually written by one of my teaching assistants while I was studying at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm not 100% sure about the title of the book, but it probably has the word meaning in it. And the author's name, she frequently writes for, I think, the Atlantic magazine. Her name is Emily Esfahani Smith. So I think her parents are from Iran. Emily Esfahani Smith. So if you get Emily Esfahani Smith and meaning, you'd probably come upon her book. And that's a brilliant sort of introduction to positive psychology, with a strong focus on getting more meaning into your life, but also your work life. So shout out to Emily. Beautiful
Shout
book.
out to you. Thank you. Those are 3 great recommendations. And another shout out to you in the chat right now. Some people have already gone to your Mapalicious site and are giving it rave reviews. So anyone who hasn't gone there yet, go check out mapalicious.com, because apparently it's got some great stuff on there to look at. So
right. And so I just have this idea, because obviously there might be a lot of questions that we couldn't cover today out of time constraints. So I love writing. One of my biggest kind of intrinsic motivations is writing. And when I'm not working or spending time with my family, I kind of automatically open my laptop and write something. So what I could do, I'm not sure when I will get this done, but I probably can take at least some of the questions that we haven't covered today. Let's say I pick the 5 or 10 questions that I really like, and then I answer them in writing on my LinkedIn Pulse profile. So you can go back to that. How does that sound? That a good idea?
Perfect. That sounds wonderful. That sounds great.
Thanks for giving me stuff to write about.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all of your great insights today and for sharing your expertise with us. It's been very helpful. And I love that you gave us actually practical tips to tackle things that are not easy. They're hard things, right? They're not necessarily tangible things. So thank you for practical approaches for handling them. I wanted to also do a shout out to any alumni who are on the channel. If you want to do some of the practice that Nico talked about in getting more used to and getting more comfortable, we have a channel on the alumni Slack called Career Interviewing. And Karen, I think we'll add it to the chat here, that you can log on and you can find another alum to practice with and go through these things and go through the motions of an interview. So doing it for the first time won't be in front of someone in accounts. You can do it with a friendly face and work through some of the issues. And then finally, don't forget to check out the Udacity page on Eventbrite and sign up for one of our upcoming webinars, and look forward to the answers, Nico, to the other questions. We'll send out a survey and include some of those as well. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks, and have a good day. And for me, it's good night.
Oh, of course. Good night. Thank you so much. I'm going to find my Eigen Tone. Bye-bye.
Bye.